In today's video, we have 3 pretty chilling stories. A story about sleeping in a car, some odd happenings in the dark, and a story about an old record player. As always, a massive thank you to the writers, whose links can be found in the description. Also, I plan to upload a true subscriber stories video in the near future. So if you'd like to send in a story for it, the email is rylhstories@gmail.com. Even if you're seeing this video in the future, I am always accepting stories. So feel free to send one in at any time. If you enjoy the video, please be sure to drop a like and comment. Subscribing if you're new is also very much appreciated. Enjoy the video, and as always, I hope you all have a great night. I've always loved long car rides. Even as a child, I was thrilled at the notion of relaxing in my seat while the outside world whizzed by me. This enjoyment didn't decrease through my adolescence. In fact, it only grew. By the time I'd received my driver's license, I was embarking on small road trips every few months. They were simple explorations, a nearby campground or a friend's house, but it gave me a feel for it. I'd always simply slept in my car on the trips, since I didn't find it necessary to spend my money on some crummy, overpriced motel. Besides, at the time, I could barely afford rent. I'd become decently skilled at it, spotting places to sleep, creating makeshift tables and beds, properly insulating my car in the winter months. All became second nature to me. I had never felt unsettled, sleeping in my hand-me-down 2003 Chevy Impala, while the night sky turned to dawn. Instead, I found it serene, waking up to whatever picturesque landscape surrounded me. But my opinions have greatly changed from then. I doubt I'll be sleeping in a car anytime soon, without the protection of a firearm. It all started when I decided to pay my parents a long-awaited visit. We were very close in my childhood, but we had grown apart when I moved 3 states away for college. I called them and I arranged to see them the following weekend. I received time off of work and began planning my route. I would be traveling from my apartment in Washington to their lovely 3-story house in California. I planned to sleep in my car around the halfway mark, and then arrive at their home that afternoon. I packed my things and set off on the road, early the next morning. I spent most of that car ride jamming out to my rock collection, and investing myself in audiobooks and podcasts. As the sun faded behind the surrounding mountains, I began to search for a secluded area for me to park. After several minutes of looking, I found it. An old, abandoned rest stop, surrounded by tall trees and the thick, mossy Oregon foliage. I pulled into the parking lot and stopped my car. I put my back seats down and created a makeshift bed out of my sleeping bag, a few blankets, and several pillows. I quickly fell off into slumber. I awoke at dawn, and returned my back seat to its normal state. I got an early start as planned. Besides a little traffic, the rest of that car ride went off without a hitch. That afternoon I arrived at my parents' house, where they were excitedly waiting for me. We spent the weekend catching up, drinking on their deck, and swimming in their luxurious pool. It was quite nice to see them again after such a long time away. The whole experience was memorable and wonderful. However, I wouldn't be writing this if that's all that happened. The morning came which I would leave, and we said our goodbyes. Navigating out of their city was a bit of a chore, but soon, it was just me and the open road. Night seemed to creep up on me much quicker. Before I could realize, I was surrounded by darkness. The tall, looming trees and thick bushes appeared much more sinister than before. They took on the appearance of thin, crooked arms, reaching out to grab me. I tried to spot a place to park, but this road seemed to go on endlessly. I became a bit unnerved, all alone in the darkness. Sometimes I swear I saw dark figures in the bushes and hiding behind trees. I chalked this up to my exhaustion, and tried to put it out of my mind. I still stayed weary and would glance behind my seat every few minutes. Finally, I spotted an upcoming pull-off, which I gladly took. At this point, I hardly cared where it went. I just wanted to leave that seemingly endless road. It led me to a desolate back road that seemed to have not been inhabited in years. I slowed my car down and parked on the roadside. I repeated my usual routine of creating the bed. I laid down to rest and closed my eyes. Exhaustion overcame me, and I quickly drifted into sleep. The loud bang swiftly awakened me. I cautiously raised my head up. "Hello, is anyone in there?" An almost inhuman voice asked. I said nothing, too enveloped in fear to respond. "I'm just looking for directions to the nearest town," he continued. I was about to say something, but then I thought to myself, why would someone be out this late, on some deserted back road in Oregon? "I was hiking with my friends and, well, they're gone now." He spoke with an ominous chuckle. "Can you just open the door so we can speak face to face?" Something deep inside me told me to not answer. In fear, I pulled my covers over my head. He then began to pound on the door, shrieking incoherently. This continued for several minutes before stopping abruptly. I breathed a sigh of relief. This victory was short-lived, for then the scratching started. Thick, ear-piercing scratching filled my ears. This continued for God knows how long, because I somehow fell back into sleep, through the horrific sounds. I woke several hours later in a sweaty mess of fright. Light rain poured down outside my window. I wasted no time getting back on the road, for I had no intention of sticking around that dreadful place. I got my bearings together, and felt relaxed after I had driven a few hours away. That was until I pulled into a gas station. I stepped onto the pavement and breathed in the fresh air. It was very comforting to have other normal people around me. I was close to accepting the fate that I had likely imagined the events of the previous night. I peered down at my outside car door and froze. There, carved into the metal surface, were several thick, deep gashes. I promptly hurried out of the store and into my car, and rode back to my apartment without stopping. This has been haunting me ever since I arrived back home. Paranoia has taken over me. All my blinds are closed, and I have at least one weapon on me at all times. I've researched possible scientific explanations, but this has yielded little result. I'm scared to leave my apartment complex. Although I desperately need human interaction, I want to inform the police, but I already know my story would not be believed. Whatever lurks in the backroads of Oregon is still a mystery. I don't know what came to me that night. Neither do I know why it did. All I know for sure is that you should never sleep in your car at night. It all started after moving into my new house. Yeah, that's pretty cliche. Believe me, I know, but it's what happened. I never experienced anything supernatural before, and, though interested, I never really expected anything to happen to me. I was able to rent the house for pretty cheap. I didn't think anything of it because it was old, and not in the best of neighborhoods, so I guessed I just got a good deal. After moving everything in, things were fine for a while. I don't remember exactly when it started, because it seemed so minor at the time. I'd leave a light on in the kitchen or the bathroom, and come back to find it off. Honestly, I thought I was just forgetting that I turned them off already, when I came back. After a while, I began to wonder, and started leaving a couple lights on purpose. Sometimes nothing would happen. Sometimes I'd come back to find the lights turned off. By now, I figured that something was off. I wasn't really scared, just confused. I thought maybe something was wrong with the electronics. I started leaving lights on a bit more often, because I thought I might be able to get some sign of why they would randomly shut off. That's when it started to take another turn. The first real time I remember something crazy happening was when I left the kitchen and living room light on while I was asleep. I woke up to a deep, rumbling growl from the kitchen. Now, from the bedroom, you can see down the hall to the living room, and that room is connected to the kitchen. I remember waking up and thinking that there was an animal or something in my house. I looked down the hall toward the living room to see the light darker. Somebody had flicked off the light from the kitchen. Another low growl came, this time from the living room, and I nearly screamed as I saw something bolt across the length of the hall opening, and then the living room light went out. I couldn't tell exactly what it was though. It just seemed like a black shadow or something. It didn't really matter. I was scared. I bolted from my bed and threw on the bedroom lights, expecting something to be in this room, and getting ready to come after me. Nothing. There wasn't anything in the room. I let out a low breath, and then I slowly moved down the hall into the living room. Once I got to the end, I practically bolted to throw on the light switch there. Again, nothing. Kitchen next, and once again, nothing. I was starting to think I dreamed all of it, before I went to turn off the kitchen lights, and stopped. Now, I was a grown man, but here I was terrified to turn off that switch. And I'll admit it, I slept with all the lights on that night. That was a mistake. When I woke up the next morning, all the lights were off again. I went to push myself out of bed and winced as my body felt sore. I pulled the sheets off to see long red marks running down along my legs and arms. It looked like something scratched me in the night. That terrified the hell out of me, but not nearly so much as when I saw what happened. Every light I left on was smashed. Every light bulb that was on last night was broken. Every lamp knocked over and smashed in. My breath caught in my throat as I looked around. Something was messed up as all hell here, and something tried to, well, do something to me. I called in for work that day, and went to immediately replace all the lights. I didn't know what to do then. I thought about leaving, but, and I know this probably sounds stupid, but this was my home. It was my first time away from my family, and this was my home. I couldn't give it up, so I stayed. Even as it got worse. Even though I was beginning to become terrified of the dark, I couldn't really sleep with a light on me at night, in the bedroom. I'd leave other lights on though, like in the hall or the living room, giving myself enough to see pretty well in the darker room. And almost every night, I'd wake up in the middle of the night to hear something growling and prowling around the living room, and then the lights would shut off. I didn't want to go look. I was terrified at the thought of being in the same room with whatever was in there, so I curled up in bed and prayed it never came in. One night after this went on for a while, I had it. I bought a gun and turned on every light in the house. Then I sat down in the middle of the living room with my gun in my lap, and a baseball bat sitting next to me. I waited. There was nothing at first for a long time. At around 2 in the morning I began to hear it. Oddly, it was behind me. I turned and peeked down the hall to my bedroom, and could hear that familiar growl. I swallowed, and held my gun in one hand, and the bat in the other, and slowly began to step around to get a better view of the bedroom from the living room. As I began to get a view of my bed, I heard a loud thump, followed by an inhuman roar. I, being the brave man I was, jumped back and away from the hallway. I wanted to end all this, but, dear God, I don't want to deal with that thing. I could hear tearing and smashing, and I don't know how I caught it, but I did manage to hear an audible click, and then nothing. Slowly I went back to peek down the hall, and the light was off once again. A deep breath, and I ventured forth, my weapons ready. This was going to be my final stand. I'd have to fight here. I drew close to the standing lamp. That was my last line of defense. I hated the dark, so I'd stay right here, next to this comforting standing lamp. I waited for it to turn off, but it never did. I looked around and quiet. Nothing but quiet. I turned then to look at the saving grace of a lamp that refused to yield. I started to find myself laughing, a crazy but alive thought, and I thought I'd finally be okay. Stepped closer and I swear I almost hugged that lamp, until I saw it. I heard the growl first, coming not from behind me but in front, from that lamp. My eyes widened and I stared as the light from the lamp intensified. I stumbled back and I don't know what happened, but I think I tripped on something. I just know I found myself flat on my back staring up at that bright, intense light. It wasn't comforting any longer, just hot and heavy and bright. I thought it was going to burn me away, and then it came. I don't have words to describe what poured from that lamp's light. It was hideous, twisted, and filled with rage. I know I'll never forget those eyes, though. Bright, hot, and white. Two glowing circles of pure malice. It hated me. It hated everything about me. And not just me. It hated all of us. Every human being. But it was stuck here. And it would lash out at what it could. Me. I don't know how I knew this, but I just knew. It lunged for me and I prepared myself for a painful death. Click. The light went out. Once again, darkness. Sweet, quiet, relaxing darkness. I stayed on the ground for a long moment, letting my eyes adjust as I kept my gaze fixated on where my standing lamp was. As the seconds passed, I could start to make him out. That mangled man standing by the lamp, one torn hand upon the switch as he looked down at me. I understood then. I understood what it all meant. Everything that happened. The man pulled his hand away from it, and then pointed his mangled finger toward it before, very clearly, shaking his head from side to side. All I could find myself doing was nodding. He wasn't the one trying to harm me. All this time, all those instances, he was trying to protect me. That creature could only come in the light, and this mangled man had been trying to keep me safe. He didn't want someone else to repeat his mistakes. I moved out the very next day, and never looked back. Whatever it was confined to that house, and so far, nothing has come at me from another light source. However, that thing will always stick with me in my mind. Every night in my new apartment, I made a habit of wandering around the house, making sure every light is off, every curtain is closed, and made sure to plunge myself in quiet, comforting, and safe pitch darkness. I want to start this off by saying, I used to crave for people to look at me. When I say look at me, I mean really look at me. It didn't need to be anyone I know. Hell, it could have just been a stranger that I passed on the streets. You see, I work for an inbound call center, so I spend my day hidden away in a small, perfectly square cubicle, talking to people over the phone, and other than people I worked with, I didn't talk to a lot of people face to face. And even then, most people just come in and get on with their day, and then go home. Now I know you are probably thinking that I'm a hermit, and spend my day ignoring people and keeping to myself. Well, that's not the case. I'm 25, and I've been told that I'm good looking. Now I don't mean model level looks, but I was average. Not ugly, but not overly handsome either. I've had girlfriends, and spent nights after work down at the pub, with people from work, along with going out for team drinks and dinners. However, even doing all that, whenever people looked at me, it felt like they were either staring through me or past me. The best way to describe it would be, Have you ever been in front of a mirror, but facing backwards away from it, and someone has walked up to you and started a conversation, but then you look at their eyes, you can see them looking at their own reflection, and not really looking at you, even though you are in a conversation with them? Well, that's how I feel all the time. As far back as I can remember, that's how I felt whenever someone was looking at me. I would get a stomach-turning feeling in my gut. My hair would stand on end. It was as if someone was staring right through me, but ignoring my very being, like I was just in the way, and what or whoever was behind me was more interesting, and mattered more than I did. Since I can remember, that's how I've always felt. Anyway, I suppose I should start at the beginning. A couple of weeks ago, my granddad passed away. Now, my granddad was nice, and occasionally funny, but he had a quirk that people in my family would always warn people before meeting him. I know every family has someone who they love, but who can be embarrassing, or would worry people if you didn't give them enough warning on their individual quirks. My granddad's quirk was that he never listened to music, and I mean never. Whenever he would get into a car and the radio was on, he would either bash at it to turn it off, or start screaming at whoever was driving to turn it off. One time my mom and I went to my granddad's house as a surprise visit. As I walked into the living room, I had headphones in. I was listening along to Avenged Sevenfold, Welcome to the Family. It must have just been too loud, because as soon as my granddad heard the music coming from my headphones, he sprinted to me. I didn't realize someone, let alone someone of his age, could move that fast. As soon as he closed the gap and was at me, he started screaming, turn it off now, make it stop. I don't want to hear it anymore." Before I could turn the music down or even pull the headphones out of my ears, he yanked my headphones out of my ears, grabbed my phone, and threw it into the wall. It was so destroyed that it no longer looked like a phone. It was just a mix of broken glass and circuitry. 10 minutes later, the police turned up at his house, banging on the door. It turned out that his neighbors had heard my granddad shouting, and called the police after they heard a loud bang against the wall, fearing that my granddad was being attacked. The whole family was very careful after that day, to ensure that there was never any music being played anywhere near my grandfather. I tell you this because my grandfather passed away at the age of 75 from a heart attack. I had volunteered to help clean out his attic, and pack away his belongings. While I was in the attic trying hard not to breathe in the dust, as I moved things around, I came across a box labeled, "Evil, everything in this box to be burned when I die." Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened the box. Inside was an old record player. I was completely shocked. I had no idea why he would have something which was designed to play music. What surprised me more was, as I began to take the record player out of the box, I noticed that at the very bottom of the box, hidden beneath the record player, was an old record. I picked up the record, which was completely covered in dust, so much that it gave the record a dull gray look. I gave it a blow so I could read the title on the record, but as I did, I ended up breathing more of the dust into my lungs than off the record. I began coughing. God, it must have been like a smoker's cough, as my mom yelled up from the bottom of the attic ladder, "Are you okay up there, honey? Want me to grab you some water?" No, that's okay. I just breathed in a lot of dust. I'll be right down," I replied. The title of the record was Private Eyes by Hall & Oates, and on the back was the date, August 29th, 1981. I headed down the ladder, record in tow. "Hey, Mom, did you know this was up there? Or that he even had something like this? As there's a record player up there as well." "No, I had no idea." Mom replied, well, taking the record out of my hand to have a closer look. "It may have been my mother's, but I'm surprised he would keep something like that, even if it did belong to her," she said while looking puzzled at the record. My grandma had died 15 years ago, when I was 10, so unfortunately, she wasn't there to ask. Maybe she could have warned me about it. That's if she even knew what it was. The rest of the day I didn't think about the record player, or the record. I just got on with going through the rest of the attic, and the remaining portion of the house my mom needed help with, and that was it. The rest of the week was a blur, between funeral arrangements, along with phone calls I had to make to the rest of the family, and not to mention the funeral itself. My uncle did give a pretty funny speech about my granddad from when he was a kid, which definitely helped cheer everyone up. The Saturday after the funeral, I was in the middle of doing some cleaning in the kitchen when I heard a knock at the door. I put down the cloth I was using to clean the sides and went to the front door. There was a red-faced delivery driver who, as soon as I opened the door, blurted out, "Delivery for you. Sorry, I'm in a rush. Please sign for it." As he hands me the form to sign, he dropped the pen. Sorry, where did it go? Ah, there it is." While bending over to get the pen, which had landed on my "Welcome to the Dark Side" doormat, his keys dropped out of his pocket. While he was fumbling with the pen and the keys, I had taken my own pen, which I keep by the door for situations like this, and signed and handed the form back to him. He then sprinted as fast as his legs would carry him back to his van. I honestly thought he was going to do a burnout on my driveway, with how fast he seemed to race off down the street. It was then I noticed the box that he had delivered. On top of the box was a note which read, "I don't have a use for this, and I was never a fan of Hall & Oates, but maybe you'll enjoy it. Lots of love, Mom." When I opened the box, I was greeted by a clean and shiny record player and record. It seems my mom had done more than just pack it up, but she appears to have cleaned it as well. It looked brand new. It's funny thinking back now. I don't understand why I didn't just sell it or throw it away. After all, I had no use for a record player. Well, you know what they say about hindsight. It's 2020. Sorry, telling you about this is harder than I thought. After reading the notes, I put the box to one side and finished up in the kitchen. After an hour later, I made a cup of tea and sat down to see what was on TV. As per usual, there was some reality TV shows and some crap popularity competition on an island. As there was nothing on, I thought I might as well listen to Private Eyes. I set up the record player and set the vinyl down on the platter. As soon as I put the needle on the record, there was a high-pitched screeching sound and I froze. My muscles wouldn't react, for what felt like hours, but must have only been a couple of seconds. All I could hear was the whining noise bouncing around in my head. Then as quickly as started, it was over, and the opening of Private Eyes began to play. "I see you, you see me," as the song began to play. I was snapped back to reality by a sizzling, burning pain in my left palm. I looked down at my hand and realized I had cracked my cup. In my hand now a mix of blood and boiling hot tea dripping through my fingers. I went to the kitchen to wash my now blistering red palm under some cold water, along with wrapping it in some bandages. I returned to the living room to see the record no longer spinning on a platter. I was so focused on my hand I had missed the whole song, which was just playing in the background. I reckon that the screeching noise was caused by the record player, which probably hasn't been used in years. So I packed away the vinyl and record player into a storage cupboard that I wasn't using and carried on with my weekend. Nothing of note happened, so I'll fast forward to Monday morning before work. I woke up on Monday morning and I felt off. You know when you don't feel like yourself, but you can't for the life of you figure out why. I decided to ignore it, as it must have just been because of the burn in my hand. I got dressed, packed my lunch for the day. I know it's childish, but I made a PB&J sandwich, as I didn't have much in the house, and then got in my car to go to work. It was at the traffic lights that it happened. I looked over at the car alongside me, and the woman who must have been in her early 20s looked at me. It was then I realized what I was feeling. She was looking at me, truly looking at me, for the first time instead of looking through me. Like I was some kind of specter. I was being looked at. I got to work and I was dizzy, almost nauseous with the feeling of being looked at. Everyone's eyes were on me. I know how vain that sounds, but that's what it felt like. That day was the first and last carefree, peaceful day I've ever had. That night I had gone to bed with the cheesiest smile on my face and the Private Eyes song going around and around in my head. As I laid there that night staring at the ceiling, I kept thinking that even though I was alone in bed, I could still feel that someone was watching me. I was watching the shadows on my ceiling dance around as cars passed by my window and street lamps shined through the gaps in my curtains. It was then I saw it. A pair of sickly yellow and bloodshot eyes staring down at me. I thought it must have been a trick of the lights, but then I saw them blink. I blinked, hoping it would cause the illusion to fade, but then there were 2 pairs of sickly yellow eyes staring at me. Then 3, 4, 10, 20, 50. I tried not to blink, but I couldn't do it for longer than a minute. Within what felt like seconds, there was no longer a ceiling above me. It was just eyes. Hundreds, maybe thousands of sickly yellow eyes, all blinking in unison with their gaze never faltering away from me. I couldn't move or close my eyes. All I did was lie there crying, wishing they would stop looking at me. I just wanted to go back to being unseen. After a while, the sun finally began to shine through the curtains, and just like that, the eyes were gone, but the feeling of being watched had not. I just kept telling myself that it was a nightmare or some kind of insomnia. I couldn't stop shaking. My eyes were red and sore from crying all night. I got dressed and left my house as quickly as I could. I was wearing mismatching shoes, but by the time I realized, I was outside of my house, and I couldn't bring myself to go back inside, not for the shoes or my car keys. I caught the bus to work. Even sitting at the back, I could feel eyes on me. Looking around, I didn't see them, but I knew they were watching me. It was then I heard it. The bus radio was playing Private Eyes. I put my headphones in, but no matter what song I put on, all I could hear was Private Eyes. I ran off the bus as soon as it pulled outside of work. I got into the office and made a beeline directly to the cubicle. I just wanted to distract myself with work. The first call that came in, I started the conversation with my usual line, and the response was, "I see you, you see me." I dropped my headset and ran to the bathroom. I got into the stall, locked the door, and just fell to the floor. Even sat on the stall floor. It felt like I was being watched. My eyes were bouncing around the stall walls and there was nothing. I was completely alone except for the feeling that was still there. It then dawned on me. The only place that was left for the eyes to be. I stared at my bandaged hand, and bit by bit began to unwrap it. There they were, in the center of my burned palm, a pair of sickly yellow eyes looking back at me, and then they blinked. It's been 2 days since I started seeing the eyes, and I finally understand what they want. Like me, all they wanted was to be seen, but me seeing them wasn't enough. They need more people to see them. They want you to see them. I'm sorry, but if you've gotten to the end of this, then it's too late for you. You probably didn't notice the song playing in the background. Private Eyes, they're watching you. They see your every move. Private Eyes, they're watching you. Private Eyes, they're watching you.